Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles to the Angelo Robles podcast. I'm also the founder and CEO at Family Office Association. Today, we're featuring, as featured on Unicorn Hunters, Forte Fitness, business going from analog to digital. It features Lauren Foundos of Forte Fit. Lauren, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me today.
And did I say your last name correctly?
That was pretty good. Yeah.
Pretty good is probably good enough by
I'll
my
take it.
standards.
Everyone says it different, so I'll accept a lot of variations.
Well, I mean, we have an audience that is very interested in entrepreneurship. Some of them as entrepreneurs, some of them as earlier stage investors. And I think what you're doing is really what's happening in a lot of businesses, a lot of different verticals, is kind of going from analog, the old way things used to be done, to digital. This was an inevitable trend no matter what. And I very simply feel that COVID-19 just accelerated it. So I think it's a really interesting time for both entrepreneurs and those that invest in entrepreneurs. Why don't we start by telling us a little bit about yourself, because I think you do have a unique and really interesting background.
For sure. Yeah. So prior to founding the company, I spent a little over a decade working on Wall Street, institutionally trading government bonds. So nothing to do with fitness or tech. But growing up, I played sports. I was a two-time All-American field hockey player, played in the U.S. national program for the #1 D1 team. So working out is a big part of my life. I'm a big user of this space. And so obviously very excited to be building something that I'm super, super passionate about.
And by the way, we're joined today by sometimes my partner in crime and definitely my better half, and that would be JJ Sowers. Many of you know JJ from being a co-host on several of my interviews and being a featured guest probably about 5 times. So pardon my manners, JJ. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, it's always great. Let me ask Lauren one more, then I'll leave 1 or 2 for you. As I said, the world is increasingly moving from analog to digital. Explain why this is a major tailwind for your company at Forte.
Yeah, I think you actually said it really well. So this was happening prior to the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, it was still a good business. The Goldman Sachs had said that 67% of US gym goers also worked out at home with a digital platform pre-pandemic. When I would tell the gyms that, they would say, well, we don't want them doing that. I'm like, well, you're not stopping them. They're already doing it. And I was like, this is you trying to ignore something that's happening, right? And then the pandemic happened and the gyms were closed. And so the only way for them to reach their customers was through digital. So they were forced to pay attention to it and forced to iterate. And so in many ways, I think this is going to be really good for the gyms because they were not willing to adapt with the consumer and they were going to get left behind. I always use the example of Blockbuster. I'm like, Blockbuster had a lot of locations and a lot of land leases they didn't want to break and they didn't want to iterate, but now there's one and it's a hotel and you could stay in it and visit it for fun. But because they didn't want to iterate. And I was fearing that the gyms were going to stay stuck and just hoping that people operated the same way as they had for 30 years. And so the pandemic has really helped them adapt. And I think that's actually going to be very good for the industry.
And I might have lied a little bit before we get to JJ's much better and very succinct questions, because I am very active in the world of fitness myself. Yeah. And I've interviewed some interesting thought leaders like Paul Carter and others. So I am a little bit fanatical relative about working out. It came a little bit from a health scare a couple of years ago, and that really made me want to get in much better shape and be very active working out. So although I do have a moderately significant home gym, the camaraderie and energy that I felt by going to a physical gym, even though it's about 25 minutes from where I live, and it has a greater variety of equipment. To me, that social interaction, as well as the variety of equipment, is important.
Totally.
Am I living a little in the past? And is this changing so rapidly that everything as I know it in the world of fitness is changing and I have to change with it?
No, I think you made a great point. So, Peloton would like everybody to stay home and work out on their bike. I don't think that that's really the reality either. I think the reality is that we do a hybrid. To your point, some days it's not efficient to drive 25 minutes there and back and you just don't have the time. But the CDC says you got to get your workout in, right? And that's to stay healthy. And so I think that's the reality, is that some days you're going to do it the churn was even high in gyms because people would fall off the wagon. And I think that having the ability to be flexible and sometimes do it at home and sometimes do it in person is going to keep people more engaged. So I think some days you're going to go to the gym, some days you're going to do it at home. And I think that's the reality. And I think everyone's going to settle into a different amount of days that each one of those falls in. But I think you're right. I think that's why I think the gyms are positioned so well, is that they do have 1,000 brick and mortar, some of the brands that we talk to. And so when people do want to have the ability to have a flexible schedule, but also a place to go, these gyms, these brick and mortars are positioned to do well, as opposed to these tech companies and apps that are solely digital only. So I completely agree with you. I think it's going to fall somewhere in between. I don't think people want to stay working out at home in Zoom meetings and never see each other again in person. I know JJ doesn't want that. I know JJ wants to see people in person again.
I don't know about him. I think he's kind of liking this, but
Yeah.
JJ, I'll give the floor to you.
He's probably pretty efficient now.
Yeah. So Lauren, how did you end up on the Unicorn Hunter? And what advice do you have to other founders that are going to be on the show since you were so successful on it?
Yeah, so I got involved in Unicorn Hunters thanks to Microsoft. Microsoft picked us for a program where they pick a couple companies of a year to support ones that they see are using more infrastructure and industries they believe have a lot of room for growth. And so they got us this opportunity. I tried out and was accepted for it. I think it was a super amazing opportunity. Obviously, to get the buy-in from Steve Wozniak, the founder of Apple, was a day I certainly will never forget. One for the books. There was a lot of amazing people on there, the Treasurer of the United States and Lance Bass from the boy band and Sync. And so, I mean, a lot of amazing people there, but obviously Steve Wozniak in the tech world was, I almost fell off my chair listening to him. So that was super exciting. I would say definitely important to pursue yourself as a brand and as a company as a brand, as well as, reaching and seeking institutional and traditional sources of funding. I think it's important to get it out there, get the message out there. And that was a great opportunity to do it.
Great. Why is Forte 10 times better than all the competitors?
Yeah, so I like to say, and I know, this is a risky thing to say, but we don't have a lot of competition. So if you want to do digital right, we don't have anybody that does that. So our competition is Zoom, which is obviously not focused on the fitness space, Vimeo and YouTube and companies like that. What their core focus is on everything and anything. And so I think that's one thing. And we spent a lot of time and money building this hardware and software that enables people to live broadcast with a high quality production. And I think that's really important. So most people that do digital either do live, have a TV studio, or they do Instagram and Zoom, which is from your phone and your laptop. So we spent a lot of time building this hardware. And then from the platform perspective, we wanted to make it super interactive. To your point, people do want it to be social and awesome. And so we have live leaderboards, and it's two-way, and you can connect your Apple Watch and compete in real time. And so we spent a lot of money on making the platform more than just a place to go watch a video. And then we also have a ton of music licensing deals. A lot of reason that companies didn't create digital content was because they didn't know what to do with the music licensing. So it became a big bottleneck for these big companies. They would get stuck, and their general counsel would be worried. And so we were like, this is becoming a bottleneck. So we need to solve this problem. So we really approached it from all angles. And so we've been able to sign some of the largest clients in the US. We're getting ready to launch the UFC, Good Life Fitness, which is Canada's largest gym chain, Under Armour World Headquarters, NFL Players Association. So a lot of great brands that we're really proud to power.
And Lauren, if you don't mind me asking, and I wanted to build up a little bit of the suspense with those questions first, but very simply, what is Forte Fitness and what exactly do they do?
Yeah, so we basically enable a gym to create a premium digital experience. So let's say a gym they have a lot of brick and mortars, and they have a big community, and they now want to offer digital. So we basically enable them to create the content in a high quality way by providing this hardware, as well as build them a digital platform that we integrate into their site and app and booking system and make it look like their own. So we do the tech, and they continue to do the content in the community, which is what they've done so well.
And if they're already charging a monthly membership, do you think this is a value added? Do they think they upcharge for it? How could they benefit?
Yeah, it depends on the gym. So sometimes they'll include it in a top tier of their membership, and then it's an add-on for the lower tiers. In other cases where it's a boutique studio, let's say like a yoga studio, you pay every time you go, pay per play, then they charge for it, all the time. So it depends on their business model, how they choose to charge their members. And then we charge them a per user fee. So it's up to them how they do it then from there.
And in terms of being on Unicorn Hunters and some of the relationships that have come on board, very prominent people, are you at a stage where you're looking for capital, or you're all set at least for now?
Yeah, so we are looking for capital ultimately just to be able to accelerate the growth that we currently have. We have over 3,000 gyms that have reached out to us. We do
Wow.
no marketing and PR, so we have more demand than we can fulfill. And so obviously just onboarding them faster and continuing to keep the first mover advantage is important to us. We raised a round at the start of the pandemic that was 200% overfunded, and we're raising another round just to continue to fuel that growth, right? And because now everyone's trying to figure it out, so we want to power as many of these big guys as we can. We're actually raising right now $20 million at a 70 million pre-money, which is being led by the unicorn hunters from the show. So Steve Wozniak, the treasurer of the United States, Lance Bass, Mo Vela, and the guys from Transparent Business. So that's been super exciting. And yeah, we're currently raising a round, which we just opened last week.
And I'm assuming in terms of the capital for first mover advantage, you want to grow and scale the company. So onboarding talent, getting more gyms to sign up. So really a lot of it is going to be people, or is it technology driven, or you're pretty good on that part already?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of money on the technology. That was our core focus. We are really delivering a hardcore tech product. So that has been actually, the team has been primarily the engineers. Now we're scaling the business side. So now it's more, we know how many manpowers it takes for somebody to be onboarded and go through that client process. And we know how many people we need to ratchet up to take the onboarding from 10 to 20 to 30 a month to be able to do that faster. And then also more efficiently, where we're focusing on the larger guys. Eventually we want to be able to power the guys in the middle tier and the smaller guys as well, more cost efficiently. So
JJ, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, what do you think the biggest challenges have been since you founded the company? I mean, I think I've known you for like 4 years now, right?
For sure. I would say fun, just finding great people is challenging, right? Finding great people to work for you that, you trust implicitly, building a great team. Obviously you can't do it alone. So at a certain point you can get something only so far. So I would say building a great team was really important, and is time consuming and challenging. And now for me, it's building a great atmosphere to work at. We have many employees now. We have, over 60 employees. And so building a place that people want to work out, that they feel they have good milestones and a culture and a community, as opposed to, in the startup phase, it's sort of every man just hustling for themselves. And so now building a place that people want to work at, I think that's challenging and exciting at all at the same time. And also just the funding process, I think is challenging. Peloton, it took a long time for them to get their funding going as well. It's just, when you're creating something that doesn't exist, it's hard for people to understand. And so just being able to get investors to start to pay attention to the fitness market, which has happened very quickly, very fast, as a lot of money is going into it, has been certainly a challenge. And also, just a lot of times investors want to see all the answers before they invest, in which case, at certain points that you are at that certain, juncture. So really helping people understand the business model, and getting the right investors involved too has been really important. JJ's been a great supporter, and our lead investor, 76 Capital, and getting great people involved has also been really important to growing the business too. No easy feat.
Yeah, as you can see, I'm wearing the hat that
That's
you
my
gave me and
man.
the shirt.
JJ's amazing. He's been a great supporter, and yeah, it's important to have investors like him too that are always helping you meet more people and get introduced to the right people, and that's what it's all about.
And what is like the biggest lesson you believe you've learned in building Forte as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say, well, one, you don't know what you're getting yourself into if your first time doing this. So I think that it's exciting, and it's a lot all at once. I think it's, I've given up a lot of aspects of my life in terms of that. I think that's important to note. I would say that just lesson was just surrounding yourself with people that you hire people at the right stage. You may be introduced to somebody that, works at Google, and they may not be the right stage for your company when you're 3 people, because they're used to working at a large company with different resource types of teams. And so it's important to hire the right people for the right stage of where you're at, that are willing to do the things that need to be done. I think that's important. I've hired some people that were great, but not willing to get their hands dirty and, do the things that need to be done, and, work on Saturday all day out of nowhere if that's what needs to be done, versus a company where, you're not used to those type of things. So I think it's important to hire people that understand what stage you're at, and are willing to do that type of work, because I've made that mistake before, and you overpay for somebody that is used to building a team and not doing the work necessarily themselves.
Interesting. And actually, JJ, a question for you. So most of my audience is going to be familiar with you being very active as a critical thinker, active in crypto and digital assets. but you also have been a very successful investor in private and public companies. When you look to make an earlier stage investment, knowing that your money may be tied up a long time and not everything is going to work out, you're only going to do that if you feel that risk is worth a reward. What do you look at when investing earlier stage in a company?
Yeah. So first off, it starts with the people, the founders, the team. And obviously, Lauren was on Wall Street and she was very successful on Wall Street. So that tells you right there, that's a person with determination, with grit, that's not going to give up. And I'm also looking for companies that are going into a very big market, and especially if they're creating the industry. And I feel like the future is going to be a major tailwind. So I think one of the things we talked about on some of your podcasts before was going analog to digital. And I just felt like, Forte is taking gyms from analog to digital, even if it's only hybrid. But I also think too, a lot of people would like to get into exercising, but they're like self-conscious, maybe they're a little overweight, or even they're not overweight, but they feel like they're overweight, that they would rather start out at home, get comfortable with it. And then when they feel like they're getting in shape, building confidence, then they'll do more of a hybrid type thing.
Totally. Yeah, that's the biggest market, change. I mean, 22% of Americans work out, the rest of America doesn't. And I think that's the biggest market. And gyms have never been able to increase that curve because there's a high intimidation factor to getting in the gym. That's my biggest dream actually for building this company, is that more people like working out and feel comfortable to go. The gym has more people living a mile from it that don't work out than to actually go to their gym, right? And I think we're all fighting for the same active people, but the opportunity to get people comfortable to ultimately step foot in the physical brick and mortar, I think is the biggest and most exciting opportunity. In China, it's 1% of people. I mean, the US is way ahead of the curve in terms of the amount of people that are active. So I think the opportunity here is so untapped. And this is, I think, the first way we're going to be able to really start to accelerate, people's confidence to be able to go into the gym and get active.
Well, actually, that does lead to a follow-up question from me. Assuming you've done the analytics to some degree, that was kind of going to be one of my questions relative to the percentage of people in the US that, let's go with the word workout. How does that compare to different regions around the world? As I travel, and I think it's because we eat too much here.
Yeah.
I don't know if we necessarily exercise less. They walk a lot more in other parts of the world, but we definitely eat more volume of calories and food. Have you looked into the health and wellness of different regions or countries? And could it scale internationally?
Yep, totally. So yeah, we're already international. We have clients in Canada, we have clients in Europe, and we're getting ready to launch one actually from Japan. So we're certainly going overseas. I think the US is way ahead of the curve in terms of fitness. But to your point, the other side of the equation is the other part that is this like supersized world that we eat. And on the flip side, in Europe, there's still smoking around children, and there's different, like they have their own, they don't wear helmets when they ride bikes. We have done certain things well and other things not well. I think the other countries are just more active, but CDC guidelines in terms of actually getting your heart rate up, that is more than just being active and being thin. And that still is not being met in overseas countries. So when I say active, I mean more the CDC guidelines, less about obesity. Obesity in the US certainly is worse than anywhere. Part of it is also just our foods are more genetically modified and they have stricter laws. And there's a lot of things that go into that. But I think in terms of meeting the CDC guidelines of activity, the US is certainly well ahead of the curve there, for sure.
And a little back to, I guess, my first question that I asked. Working on Wall Street could be very hectic, time consuming, very stressful, especially the kind of job you had, which I completely understand. But I'm assuming you were doing well. You left that behind and potentially that career to start something from nothing, knowing that in theory, and I think this could be misleading, but over 90% of businesses don't make it after a couple of years. Did you look at it as taking a risk, and how did you hedge your bet, so to speak?
For sure. Yeah. So I wasn't like trying to start a company. I live next to Peloton. I saw sort of what was going on there. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. They don't have a community. We should build this for, other companies that have millions of members. And I got so fixated on this idea and I became so distracted at work that they would, say, Lauren, you just bought 10 million to your notes. And I'd be like, on a call about the company. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I have no idea. I became so fixated on it that I actually just ultimately decided to leave my job and focus on this. I had bought a 3-floor loft in Chelsea in New York City. So didn't plan on quitting my job and leaving a good salary behind. But I think I just felt so adamant about what the future was going to look like. And the future looks like exactly what it does today. So I just knew if I didn't try it, and I would tell a sad story that was my idea. And I thought of that first and I didn't do anything. And I was like, I don't want to tell that story. Like everybody says, I thought of that. And then I saw it, people were making that. And I was like, you know what? And I have to say to anybody thinking about it, like, my old job was great and very lucrative, but my new job is incredible. We make people's lives better. We change businesses. Like, I mean, I didn't know how unfulfilled I was in that regard until I started something new. And I think, and just, I've learned so much. I know so much about so much more. The breadth of my work knowledge is, much wider now. And I think at the very least, people were like, "Oh my God, you're quitting your job." I'm like, I didn't just say I'm going to go drink every day and not work. Like that was their reaction. Felt like I was saying that. I'm like, this is actually the most, to your point, is the most challenging thing that anybody can do. And I think like I've grown so much, and if everything, didn't work out for some reason, that this would still have been the most amazing experience. And I think, if you're, obviously there's a high risk to that in terms of the money. I know I haven't paid myself in years, and there's all these other things that come with that. And so you have to see where you are at in life and obviously determine if makes sense for you to do that. But I think I just knew if I wasted any time that the opportunity would be gone.
And in terms of what is success going to look like for you and investors as well. So you as I'm assuming majority shareholder, your early investors and potentially investors coming on board. I think it's pretty obvious if your valuation now is XYZ, you'd like it to be a hell of a lot higher. Possibly have some kind of liquidity event, which would benefit yourself and anyone who's an investor. But you have certain metrics that you're willing to share that could showcase what success would look like to you as an entrepreneur for your company?
Yeah, I would say success is obviously building this to be an enormous company and making it a valuable exit for all our investors. We raised at 5, 10, 17 and a half, and now $70 million. So I think in terms of those milestones, those are exciting for an investor, right? They're certainly, have now 10x in some cases or more their money, which is great. But I think ultimately, we've had the opportunity to sell the company. And we just felt that we were at a really pivotal point where the valuation was going to be much higher very quickly, and so we didn't take that. But I think for us, it's important to we would either love to IPO it or have, depending on the market and what's going on in the market, have a very successful exit. We are partners with many of the people that would be our acquirers today, so certainly positioning those relationships, because they don't happen overnight, to have all those options as we kind of navigate the waters and where the world and market is going, right? I think obviously it's still continuing to go strongly in our favor, which is super exciting for the business.
And I mean, obviously, speaking of unicorn hunters, becoming $1 billion valuation and growing is not impossible,
Totally.
especially with some of the people that you have behind you. But looking at certain other companies, and you've mentioned Peloton several times, and I know, although part of the community aspect could be a little similar, it's very different.
Totally.
But remind me maybe what the valuation approximately, or if JJ knows, of what Peloton is.
Peloton's now valued at $43 billion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. It's a lot. It went very quickly from 1 to 43. Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah. So now they're publicly traded. They've done very well. They had their first sort of PR nightmare, unfortunately, of late. So that was a little bit, I think, painful for them in the public markets. But other than that, they've been doing very, very well. Obviously, the pandemic is very, very good for business. I think that the opportunity is so huge. I mean, what's interesting is the gyms that have been around forever, right? Like the YMCA, they have 20 million members, and those and gyms like that, or even just equipment manufacturers, their whole market cap isn't even 1/50th of what Peloton's is. Like, I think that's what's so interesting about tech and the velocity that these things move now. It's a really exciting market.
And I do have a couple of maybe final questions, but JJ, I'm going to kick it to you to see if you had some questions for Lauren before I ask away.
Oh yeah, I think we covered a lot of the questions, but I was just wondering if there's any kind of like crazy wild stories you could tell us about Wall Street that you can actually tell us about that people wouldn't think of.
Yeah, I mean, I used to actually, how I got into this business of focusing on this stuff. Yeah, there was a lot of crazy and wild stories. Some of it not good for the public ear, but I would say one of the things that was I was losing my sense of self because I had to be at work so early that the gyms were either not open or it was just way too early to wake up, and so I didn't have time to work out because then I would go out with customers at night, and so we'd go, to concerts and to dinner and all this stuff, and it was drinking and going out every night, and I felt like I was losing my sense of self because working out has been a big part of my life. And so I started to go work out. And then I would meet my clients like an hour or two later and they would be like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "Listen, I'm going to be there with you holding your hand from 7 to 10. Just like, let me go work out for an hour." So they started to come with me. So I started to actually bring all the clients to the gyms with me and make it part of my social, like it was my own like thing that I wanted to do, but I made it part of my thing. So would amass a big crew of people and we'd go to all these different places and start to work out. And it was before the kind of fitness scene was what it was, but I was making it a part of my socializing. One, because I was just worried about my own health. And two, everyone on Wall Street's really competitive. So we'd go to classes that were super competitive and, it'd be fun to kick those guys' butts because I'm a pretty good athlete. If you were also a male competitive collegiate athlete, then I certainly can't compete with you. But if you're just a regular guy that wasn't an athlete, I could probably get pretty close or beat you. So yeah, so that was a big part of my impetus. Like I started getting really involved in gyms and studios because I was like really looking where to take clients. So that was how I ended my career on the street. It was sort of a nice little transition into this world. I brought a client to a spin class actually, and it's one that keeps track of your score, like with leaderboard points. And so I always win. So he couldn't figure out how to clip his shoes in. And he started raising his hand and he was like, "Lauren, you looked at me like you never met me in your whole life." I'm one, embarrassed that he was raising his hand in the middle of class. And two, I was trying to win the class. I wasn't going to help him get his shoes fixed. I was like, no, he's like, "You looked at me like," I was like, yeah, I'm like, I'm about to win this thing. You think I can help you with your little shoes? Like, just figure it out. Like, so definitely, yeah, I think that was a big part of the end of my career was instead of going to dinners was going to classes with people. Trying to keep myself healthy. I was getting worried for my own health.
So in terms of actually, since you bring up, obviously we're talking about fitness. And I have a dog too. I completely get it. Hello. It sounds like a nice little dog. What kind of dog
Sorry
is it?
about that. A little Westie. He's a little guard dog.
I have a Pony Corso. It's a little loud. What does I know there's no such thing as typical because we need to change it up to keep from getting bored, if nothing else. But what does a typical workout for Lauren look like? Are you more into, like you said, cycling? Is it aerobic? Is it anaerobic? If anaerobic and weights, do you do push pull? What does exercise look like for you?
Yeah, I usually like super aggressive workouts. I play, as an athlete, I definitely like to work out super hard. I would say, I take a lot of classes in New York City. So I used to love a bunch of classes called Tone House as a city, a class in New York City. If you look it up, the Google reviews are hilarious. They're like, "I don't know what this class was made for. These people must all be professional athletes." I like super intense classes. I definitely like to run. I do a bit of everything and certainly weightlift as well. I aspire to do more yoga and stretching. I always say I'll make time for that and I somehow don't, but definitely very active. And I like to do a lot of HIIT workouts, spinning, cardio and lifting as well. So and during the pandemic, unfortunately, all the gyms were closed. So I never thought for a year in my life I would not go to the gym. So that was certainly, and also just validating for this business, right? Because I, have worked out so aggressively in gyms for my whole life. So it was interesting to be able to figure it out. And now that we've gone back to the gym, I'm happy to say that what I was doing was working. I still feel like I'm pretty in shape. I wasn't sure what was going to happen when I went back to some of the classes that, I had used to take. I was like, am I going to be able to still do this stuff? And I was happy to, to learn that the digital stuff that I've been doing and running and cycling and all that has been keeping me fit.
Yeah, I mean, again, the camaraderie and energy and a little bit of sense of competition in a gym is good. The variety of equipment that, again, even people with resources, if they're living in a building in a city, just may not have that breadth of resources available to them. But I think it would be a mistake to use that actually as an excuse. Like you said, you could get out and run, you could do HIIT. And oh, by the way, shockingly, air squats, push-ups
Yeah,
and
prisoner
pull-ups
workout.
actually work pretty damn well.
Yeah, the old school prisoner workout works. Exactly. Those guys get fit in there. I mean, that's the truth. Like the bottom line, I think too, is like, and I've always had that mentality is like, if I didn't have a lot of time, I live in the west side of New York City. I would just run to the West Side Highway and back, and it takes 8 minutes. And then I shower. I'm like, because it's also just keeping that routine. It's if once you say like, well, I don't have time today, and you do nothing for 7 days, guess what? You don't want to do it like people that don't work out. If you keep that habit of doing it, even if it's really little, you will stay in it, and you want to work out every day. I think that's what's so interesting to me is like, I can't wait for that hour of the day that I get to work out. I don't see it as a chore. It's like I'm dying to do it, and I want people to aspire to feel the same way. I think once you get in that habit, like anything else, then you want to do it. So I think it's really keeping that consistency that's important. And that's where I hope that digital is going to be able to fill that void for people that, let's say you travel a lot in the summer and it seems it's going to be hard, but you want to be a part of your community, then you could take their classes digitally and keep it going. And I think that that's going to be really helpful for people. There's a lot of on and off the wagon people, big percentage of people that, get active are going on and off and not staying consistent. So I hope that digital helps that.
And for those, and I have a couple of questions to wrap up, then we'll, share for those that are qualified purchasers and may have an interest in following up your contact info. But if someone would like to watch the episode of Unicorn Hunters, how would you recommend that? Do they simply Google Unicorn Hunters and your company name and it'll pull up, or how could they do so?
Yeah, so you can go to unicornhunters.com, and it will be available on Prime Video. I don't know the date yet, but right now you can just watch it at unicornhunters.com.
That's easy enough. And I'm
Yep.
going to ask you again, kind of, because I do have a little bit of a sub audience in the world of fitness. It may be a little off topic, but I'm interested in getting your opinion.
For
And
sure.
those that are interested in this topic, I recommend going back about 2 months ago, my interview with Paul Carter. And I actually shared that with you, Lauren, but I know you're busy. But this was someone, admittingly, he's smart. He's an engineer.
Yep.
He's a big figure in the world of finance,
Yep.
in fitness.
Yep.
We all start from nothing. And basically the gist of it was how I kind of went from nothing to making $1.2 million a year in the world of fitness.
Yep.
So when you look at someone who starts usually as a trainer, there's only so many hours in the day. And if you're not good at attracting clients, getting them to come back, getting new ones, and whatever you may be, how many hours billable do you need to make $100,000 a year? If I'm charging $70 an hour, whatever, I need 30 billable hours a week. But eventually we reach a bit of a cap on that, or we just simply get physically just exhausted. We're not 21 forever.
Yep.
So how to then go from being happy and making a living, but going to a little bit of an other stratosphere in the world of fitness. So I have a couple of people that I know that are younger, that are feeling out, like I want to start a gym. And I hear what you're saying. My little problem with that would be, one, it's going to cost money because of brick and mortar. And it's a way to do that, out of a garage, out of a warehouse, out of a van, or just digitally in a different way. And suppose, I hate to bring this up, I really do, please. But my God, suppose we have another COVID-19 and close again, and you have a rent commitment for 5 years, or at least whatever you want to call it. So what is some advice you would give to a younger entrepreneur interested in fitness and maybe dreams bigger than just getting by?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, to your point, there's a cap on just even if you charge $100 an hour and you train people all day long, there's a cap on how many, what you can make there, right? You only have so many hours in the day. You have to commute from client to client. So that's where I do think that digital is important for these guys to be able to break beyond that. I think the other thing is that also, if you're a good trainer, you may not be a savvy Facebook marketer, or, to reach beyond that as well. So there's also that aspect of it too, is that to get to the next level, you may need a couple people to help you do that, right? Nobody should be or is expected to be good at everything. So I think that's the other thing, is if you're great at teaching content and making a community, maybe finding that person that can help sort of do that business side of it. Often I find when there are some trainers that excel, they have a spouse that is a marketing expert, or they have they have somebody else that is working with them, right? It's hard to be good to find the time ultimately to do all those things well. So I think digital is important for even the brick and mortars to reach well beyond the like we have some clients that are having hundreds of people in their class in addition to the actual class that they couldn't fit in the room before, right? And I think that's the other reality. As a trainer, I know you want to be making money when you go to sleep too, right? And so you teach one class and that class keeps teaching, can keep making money. So I think obviously that's where technology becomes so important, right? Or you're very limited on what you can do.
Oh, for sure. I mean, some of the things that Carter and others that I mentioned could do when you hinted at them, and I'm not saying they're easy, they're not, but that would be building your social media presence, knowing how to use Insta, how to use YouTube. Eventually, as you get somewhat of a following, merch, in-person classes, one-on-ones, group, they come and travel to you and they pay whatever 5,000 or 6,000 as you build up an influencer type status. And again, I'm not saying any of that is easy. It's not. If it was, everyone would do it.
I was going to say it takes a very small group of people that actually succeed or are early to doing some of those things, right? Some of the ones that have really, propelled to the top, like Kayla It Signs is one of the first Instagram. Sure. Her app is downloaded more than the Nike training app. I mean, she kills it, but she was early right there, right? So, now it's tougher to do that. I think, it depends on where you're at.
Like, I don't want to make it a digital assets discussion, but something that would be early for people like that would be NFTs. So just look into how that could change the dynamic. Now, again, that to some degree takes a little bit of marketing savvy, understanding digital assets, and having perhaps a little bit of a social media presence so you could communicate in terms of what you do. JJ, any final questions, either comments on that subject or for Lauren?
No, I guess you can just let everyone know how they can follow Forte on the different socials and just how they can reach her if they're accredited investors or qualified purchasers.
Of course.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So we're goforte.fit. And my handle is L Foundos, my last name. And then also, if you'd like to invest, obviously you can watch the show Unicorn Hunters. You can click there from there, or you can go to invest.goforte.fit and then see the private placement and the entire deal as well. So please definitely check that out. We'd love to get everybody involved. This is a super exciting round, and excited to be having people like Steve Wozniak and these crazy investors, including JJ, my favorite investor.
And you might have just mentioned it, but do you have someone from your team, if someone wanted to email specifically, or an info ad or something like that?
Yeah, so we have invest@forte.fit. You can email us there, or concierge or partnerships@forte.fit. So if you're a gym and you're interested in partnerships, and then concierge is sort of our general @forte.fit, and invest@forte.fit is for the current round.
Well, that's fantastic. And everyone, I am Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast, founder and CEO at Family Office Association. And there was some investment dialogue today because many of you in my audience are interested in that. A reminder, you need to do your own diligence. You could always lose money when you invest. And what we're talking about today from the investing perspective is really meant for, I would assume at minimum, accredited, probably more qualified purchasers. So again, be qualified and do your own diligence. But it's been great having JJ as a co-host and his insight as an investor. Lauren was fantastic and really interested in what she's doing. Look forward to unicorn status sooner rather than later.
We're getting there. Working on it.
It's been so great to have you on. I could be followed on YouTube at Family Office, on Instagram at Family Office Association, and check out our website to learn a little bit about the company. And very simply, it's our company name, FamilyOfficeAssociation.com. Everyone, on behalf of JJ as a tremendous co-host and Lauren as our guest, thank you so much. Look forward to your success and interviewing you again in the future.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Bye, guys.